Alrighty, good evening. Welcome to NycosRPG. This is Nykos's Launchpad, and I am Jonathan Albin, Game Master J. And we are tonight talking about a couple of topics only. It's going to be a relatively short show, but at least in theory, I have a couple of points I want to cover, and then we will be closing out for the evening, unless, of course, somebody jumps on to chat with us. I want to talk tonight about the concept of imagination and creativity and if there is an expiration date on using an imagination. In our world today, there are a great number of adults that hold that we should simply all grow up, that the concept of living in an active imagination environment just simply is too chaotic and too unpredictable and such that we should simply walk away from that childlike behavior. As a matter of fact, there are those that would quote scripture, and while I am somewhat versed in it, the concept of growing up talks about in the passage that they normally use. They say that we know in part and we see in part, but then when that which is in part has been done away, that which is in full will be revealed, and therefore we will be able to see it, and therefore we should put away the childish things. And I think they misunderstand that passage. I think that when we speak of growing up and becoming less childish, we should be putting away the childish things, not the childlike things. And imagination is, in essence, part of the drivers of what makes us who we are. And so this concept of locking it away or putting away the imagination, I believe, is sort of antithetical. I think the premise of requiring us to grow up and give up on imagination actually misunderstands the concept completely, because our creativity is that which is as much a part of what the if you will, the Creator gave us as not. And I know there are those that don't hold to the perception of a Creator, but nonetheless we have universally between human beings, for the most part, the concept of imagination. Now, whether or not we have the same ability to see images, or whether we are perceiving of thoughts as diaphanous abstracts, in any way we do it, it is still a universal concept that human beings have imagination. And I do also feel that this has to do with the very nature of our being, that we are beings not only of body but of mind, and therefore we have to live in a place, if you will, within our heads at least part of the time. And I think our culture has accepted this notion of growing up and growing older and putting away the imagination, much to its detriment. By accepting those concepts, the culture itself has closed off. It'd be almost like you were working with one arm tied behind your back. It's not as nearly as effective, and it certainly doesn't get the utility out of each individual. And I believe this is why what we're doing with the Nykos Launchpad is going to be revolutionary, because it's going to overturn this concept altogether, and we're going to put creativity and imagination back into our hands. Because after all, imagination is one of the primary cornerstones of any innovation. We certainly have to be able to see the less possible as at least probable before we can move into actually doing something different. And imagination is also ultimately a key to understanding other people. If we cannot open our minds enough to see the position from which they are speaking, then we put ourselves in position of being judge, jury, and executioner, and therefore cutting off the ability for empathy. Fundamentally, imagination is the eyes that see and the ears to hear what others are meaning, because if we only try to see things through our own perspective, we will always be blocked out from the success of that attempt, because we're going to be holding ourselves down and cutting off our ability to perceive. Ultimately, I do believe that the concept of belief and faith and acceptance, these are all terms that are bandied about by various people at different times to try to get people to engage, but the reality is that all of them are dependent upon imagination. We cannot conceive of and hold on to ideas that are beyond our capability without the ability to imagine. And so we need to make sure that we hold on to and grab our imagination with both hands, because we only lose our imaginative nature when we choose to. And our culture, although it foments and promotes the idea of losing it or putting away your creativity, I advocate that we don't. We actually utilize the Launchpad to reinvigorate and reinitialize your creativity and bring us back to the place where we can communicate more fully. Speaking of Launchpad, of course, we've gone over the various terms at different points, and today we're going to talk a little bit about the final step of the process, and that is the idea of wordsmithing. Now, the idea of being a wordsmith is the idea that you're going to create or alter terminology to more fully describe and explain your position or your strategy or your ideas so that others can engage with them and react to them. And this is fundamentally built on a concept that my employer long ago used to say. A very good friend of mine used to say, words mean things. And it's pretty simple. They do. If we hear words, they carry meaning. And when we have this understanding that words mean things, then we can start to collectively and individually sculpt our language so that we are more easily understood and the information that we're trying to convey becomes more acceptable. Now, one of the real reasons why you want to establish a wordsmithing regimen when dealing with the concept of Launchpad is that you want to build up your differentiation. Each of us comes to the world with our unique view. And although we can convey what we believe to be meaning, it doesn't necessarily suggest that you're able to convey full meaning unless you come up with ways of differentiating what your concepts are from other concepts that are similar. And fundamentally, this isn't a difficult thing to do, but generally it's associated with the theme or the concept from which you are coming. If I am speaking in terms of visualization and mentalization and imagination, I need to develop a sense of terms so that you can discern the differences between them. If I am speaking of the volume of a location, of what am I speaking? Am I speaking of its length, width, and height, which is also a way of measuring volume? Or am I talking about the decibel level? Those are both ways of using the same term that are ambiguous. And so by using the terms that differentiate in a clear way, so when I say I'm speaking to the volume of your imagination, I'm speaking to the visual space that you're able to create in your mind that you can work with, whether that be a 3-foot by 3-foot space right in front of your face, or if it's the entire, football field of distance that you can identify objects on the horizon line. These are both ways of us utilizing the term volume to get a uniform understanding. And by making these words things that you use in vocabulary during your regular conversations, you hope to vocabularize those terms so that when others hear them, they will immediately go to the meaning you conveyed, not the possible meanings they might know. This is really important when you're talking about something that's new and innovative, because you've got to make sure that you are conveying the proper message so that they are able to grab it. And so you want to, as you're speaking about these things, not only use the same uniform terms over and over, you need to establish patterns of use so that they recognize that, okay, we're in speaking of clearing the baffles and preparing our minds for concepts, we want to increase the volume that we are able to manipulate, and therefore we need to focus on those terms so that we can establish a pattern of thinking. Now, sometimes it's easy to overthink. It's easy to go, well, I'll just come up with a whole bunch of new words, and each word will have its own unique meaning, and then I'll have to teach everybody those meanings. It's like, you don't have to do that. Most of us have concepts in our minds already. If I say to think about an elephant, just me saying that, there's a million different ways we could see the elephant. But if I say, imagine it to be a Republican elephant, or a, whatever I give as the descriptor to the elephant gives it more clarity. And so by staying in general thought processes and not trying to overspeak or trying to overcomplicate, you can actually get to better meanings for your conveyance. Whoops, pardon me. Without having to come up with a whole new vocabulary. This also means you want to honor your roots, whatever framework you're coming from. For example, I'm coming from the standpoint of a role-play game. So the terms that I use are things that would be used in a general role-playing environment. So if I say that we're working on the clearing your baffles because it's a way of improving your saving throws, and then I use saving throws to mean specifically the ability to clear a portion of your mental process so that it's better to be used, then I'm honoring the roots, because those that know games would also know what I mean when I say a saving throw, and it would kind of make sense. And by honoring your roots, you're also staying within your lane, so to speak. We obviously aren't all geniuses. We can't all hold the same level of conversation at all times. So by honoring your roots and staying close to the place that you came from, you're able to reach to those people who are already amenable to what you're trying to say, and therefore can learn to work within that vocabulary. But of course, you need to be able to allow for adaptation, because certainly when I say something, a player or a game master might have a different perception, and it might take some work to massage them into alignment so that they are understood or whatever. The point here is that when you build this vocabulary, when you're going through the wordsmithing process on your project, you want to leave it as adaptable as possible, as understandable as possible, but more importantly, it has to be a usable process, because if the viewer and the participant can't grasp the terms, or won't find them easily adaptable to their own vocal patterns, it's useless. But all of this comes down to, once you've established your wordsmithing, and once you've established what your working terms will be, practice. You need to stay within those terms. Right now, for example, I'm working with one of my closest associates in reestablishing a easier speech pattern for myself, because I often pontificate and talk too much, and that may be even the case here. But the idea is to practice, get used to the easier and more simplistic terminology so that the information can be conveyed. My same mentor who taught me words mean things also constantly said, English, it's a difficult language. And that was his way sometimes of washing to the side the conflicts that might come up when people disagree. But the reality is that English is a difficult language, and that we have to develop ways of speaking that provide meaning, because meaning is intent. And if we have something we want to convey, we need to do so through meaningful vocabulary and as simple as possible word use to make it acceptable and easy to achieve with everyone else as well. Now, I know this has been a short episode, but those are only 2 points I wanted to cover. If there's something you wish to address with us, make sure you leave us a comment via the comment section, or, of course, while I'm online in the chat box. We definitely respond to all messages coming in that way. Do remember we're coming up on the end of we're at the midweek, and so there are many events that are coming up in the next weeks or so. So if you want to know more about what we're doing, check out our Discord, which is listed below. Join that. You can leave messages and even chat with us, and perhaps even be online with us at some point in the future. If you want to know more about how you can become part of the family, check out patreon.com/join/Nykos. And of course, for information on the product, NycosRPG.com, and for lore on these stories and adventures, check out NycosRPG.info. All right, I want to thank you for your time tonight, and I want to let you know, wrong button. I want you to know how much I appreciate you being here, and if you like what you see, make sure